Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. The drama continues going into the new F1 season, especially after what happened the other day at F1 75. Jos Verstappen reveals that his son Max was not at all happy with what unfolded, getting booed in front of the 25,000 strong crowd to such an extent that Max has apparently said if there's another similar event in London next year, he will not be there in attendance. The FIA themselves, the governing body, have come out with a statement today defending Horner and Verstappen over this whole saga. What do you guys think about this in the comment section below? Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. First of all, a couple of updates on various teams. Haas, to start with, discussing how their car, they expect to be substantially stronger. They want a significant boost from the first race and beyond. Notably, they are maintaining their Ferrari 2024 front suspension, which is a pushrod configuration. They've not decided to take Ferrari's new version for 2025. They feel like it would change too much for them to really adjust the car from. So they know what last year's front suspension is. On paper, there shouldn't be too much advantage to be gained one way or the other. Ferrari had a very competent car last year that nearly won the championship with a push rod front suspension configuration. There is a general feeling that a pull rod in this particular aerodynamic setup in these new regulations may give some sizable aerodynamic edge, but not significant enough to be massively relevant to a midfield team. So Haas believe it may help them sticking with what they know and upgrading elsewhere. The midfield, I imagine, is going to be very competitive, but some teams will focus more on 2026 than other teams. Alpine, Aston Martin spring to mind on that end. There was a bit of drama yesterday as well, so you guys might remember Bybit, the former rear wing sponsor of Red Bull. They've now got a new crypto sponsor there, I think, instead. Yesterday there was, a revelation that Bybit had $1.5 billion worth of Ethereum basically stolen, and obviously it was kind of all going on around the Formula 1 of the crypto world. Now, they're no longer with Red Bull, but there were some funny comments around how maybe Max Verstappen's Aston Martin money has got to come from somewhere. But speaking of some of these cars, I just did want to mention this graphic, because we talked about this the other day, but I'm not sure I ever shared an actual image of it. These are the wishbone locations at the front suspension for the McLaren, who have had this pull rod configuration now for some time, and the new Ferrari design as well. Now, generally speaking, if you look at these locations, you would say that the McLaren one is much more extreme interpretation of what we have seen from them over the last few years, increasing the level of anti-dive. My understanding is, according to what people say that know much more about this than me, the gap between these, like the angle between these two wishbones, does not necessarily indicate the level of anti-dive, but it generally speaking does, depending on other things. So, I just wanted to clarify it's different. And the argument would be the McLaren interpretation is rather more extreme, but this is certainly new for Ferrari based on what they've done over the last few years. And there's a feeling from Ferrari that they'll be hopeful this will provide them some level of advantage compared to what they've had in previous years, or certainly open the door to a higher ceiling. I think that's the main thing Ferrari want to achieve, is that their development over the next 6 months is strong enough to be able to win the championship then and there, effectively, whereas their previous iteration of the car, with some of the changes they've made this year, they believe there is a higher ceiling of the new concept, even if the car right at the start of the season isn't as fast as they would maybe like it to be, it should still be good enough. I think that's the plan for Ferrari going forwards. Of course, Hamilton, if he wants to win, and if Ferrari want to win the Constructors, will need to get up to speed quickly, but he did say that compared to when he moved to McLaren, of course, initially, and then when he moved to Mercedes, he is adapting faster, or like he's transitioning more quickly than he has experienced in the past. Few reasons for that. Of course, he's much more experienced now. Also, the fact that everything at Ferrari is in one place, the engine side, the aero side, he can be there all day, every day, and experience everything that he needs to, right? So Hamilton believes that he's growing and learning quickly. Of course, his Mercedes start was pretty good, and, his McLaren start was incredibly memorable as well in Australia all those years ago, back in 2007, of course, famously overtaking Alonso around the outside at turn 1. So that's interesting at least to note, but it's definitely true as well that whatever Hamilton can do to the team, it's not going to matter that much if the car isn't good enough to win. Even Alonso was commenting on this, at least something to that effect, making a slightly different point, but still the point applies. He's talking about Lewis and says, Newey will always have more impact than any driver. I don't know what Hamilton will bring or add to Ferrari. It will surely be less. than what a designer can bring. Not necessarily what a designer does bring, but a good designer who knows what they're doing. Sure, the car is the most important thing in Formula 1. If Max Verstappen is in a Sauber, you know, he's not winning the championship, right? So we're going to see very shortly what Newey's impact starts to be. Obviously, there's going to be a lag time, but he starts work at Aston Martin in just over a week, I'm pretty sure. I think it is, maybe it is literally a week. I think the 1st of March, and it's only 28 days in February. So, well, I guess a week today would therefore be a Saturday. So I don't imagine Newey's going to be working Saturday. Maybe he will. I don't know. 3rd of March, let's say. Monday, 3rd of March. That may well be Newey's first day officially at Aston Martin. I'm sure that he's been cooking things up on his pen and paper at home over the last several months, but that's going to be the date where we start to see that lag time begin. And then in a few months, Alonso was saying that Newey will give some help to the 2025 concept where possible, but his main focus, of course, will be nailing things for the new regulations in 2026. Let's talk Red Bull there, Max Verstappen, because the drama just never really goes away, does it? And it's certainly true with regard to the FIA and Max and Jos and whatever's happened there. So this was Max's press conference, his first one of the season. He didn't seem especially enthralled, let's be honest, to be there in London. Max and the other drivers generally prefer to go to events where they can race cars. They can maybe deal with the media because they get to drive cars fast through the majority of the weekend, which is really what they're always there to do. Whereas for Max, he was of course asked plenty of questions on what's going on with the swearing drama and the FIA and the state of Red Bull and the way the car's developing and all those type of things. And of course, Max gave his comments on it. You might imagine that Max isn't going to try and say too much this season. There's a feeling that maybe Max will start running his own press conferences again, as he did towards the end of last year with the way that some of the drama was unfolding. But the big drama really for Max during the course of it was this. Now, look, Red Bull's car launch wasn't exactly my favourite, but Horner comes out, Lawson comes out, Max Verstappen comes out, and, you know, Lawson generally getting cheers, Max Verstappen getting plenty of cheers, but, you know, overruled at least on the home audio by the boos that Verstappen got, and then, of course, understandably, I'd imagine, plenty of boos for Christian Horner as well, and for the FIA themselves, let's not forget. So, definitely Max in this moment would have been like, what am I doing? Right? Like, I'm here to drive cars, I'm walking out in front of this crowd, London just getting booed. And look, at the end of the day, my opinion is this is sports, and we'll discuss that a little bit more in a second. You are going to have villains, it is how it is. The sport wouldn't be the sport, in my opinion, if you know, there were no rivalries and everyone got cheered all the time wherever they go. But we'll discuss some of the nuances in a second. One key point to note, though, is that according to Nigel Mansell, who knows who he's spoken to, difficult to say, but he's apparently heard rumours that Red Bull have done a good job with their car over the winter and that Max is not just going to lie down. It is very interesting though, because despite the fact that Max has performed undoubtedly at the highest level in the sport from a driver perspective on average over the last few years, he's not really the favourite this year. Like, in my mind, I kind of feel like he still is. But technically, according to the bookies, if you look at what the bookmakers are generally saying, they're giving Lando the edge in this year's championship because of where McLaren are and because of where Red Bull are expected to be. And look, if I had to predict the Constructors' Championship results, yeah, I think I'm probably putting Red Bull third again, or something in that kind of ballpark. So I guess on that evidence, it's difficult to say Max is going to be the favourite for the year. But if his car actually is at least relatively competitive, Max is always going to be in the mix. He's just too good at executing on weekends and being consistent and not having stinkers. Look, he has the occasional one, but he usually executes. It's just, I think for Max, if things start this season kind of poorly, especially if they start as he kind of ended last year, the latter half, frustration may start to kick in, especially looking forward to 2026 when rumour has it Red Bull's engine is not really going to be where they need it to be. So, you know, I think it'd be better for the sport if Max at least has a reasonably good car that he can potentially get wins and challenge for the title in. Mansell thinks they are going to deliver that, but equally, if Red Bull had a good winter, but Ferrari and McLaren had an excellent winter, then there's basically no chance, right? It's all a relative game at the end of the day. Horner even said that he's happy to see that Lando is the favourite, as he, you know, this is literally his exact comment. So, you know, the fact that Max is not the theoretical odds-on favourite, that Red Bull are behind the curve in that sense this season, maybe puts pressure onto the others. I think certainly for Lando, this is a big question that I have, and maybe something that Horner believes Max can capitalise on. is how Lando's going to deal with being the favourite, right? People are going to say that to him going into the season. Like, he didn't win last year's championship, he wasn't even very close to winning it, but he's the title favourite this season in most regards, and that pressure is going to weigh on his shoulders to some degree. I think he can manage that pressure now better than he did before, but it's not guaranteed how well that's going to work. But back to the drama with the booing, because Horner was booed massively, as were the FIA, and Max as well. And we discussed this the other day. Max has gone into this kind of villain role in Formula 1, certainly for British fans in general, after what's happened over the last few years. And this shouldn't be a massive surprise. This is what happens when a driver wins for a long period of time, right? Max has dominated the last few seasons, beat Hamilton very controversially in 2021, but it's not like what happened at Abu Dhabi was his fault. But there's a lot of Hamilton fans that aren't particularly pleased with Red Bull in general over the last few years. And look, I'd be cheering Max if I was in the venue. I think he's, phenomenal driver, great champion in many respects. But I understand why the drama over the last few years, the battle last year with Lando, some of the incidents in Mexico and elsewhere, the drama with Russell at the end of last season and even the year before, and then, as you guys probably remember, the drama with the British media and the British media bias and these things, which, look, there is British media bias, there is Dutch media bias in the Netherlands, there is Spanish media bias and Italian media bias in those respective countries too. Like, I don't think this is an unusual thing. The feeling that Red Bull sometimes have is that, well, often the British, let's say, coverage, that's what becomes the global coverage in many respects, and therefore it should be more neutral. That is totally a fair point as well. But Max has picked some fights at times, people have picked fights with him, and this is how it is. You dominate the sport for a number of years, you win everything during 2023 and before, and you win last year's World Championship as well. It's only natural that people in that position get into this kind of villain position where people want to see them lose. That's how sports are, that's how it's always going to be, and I don't think there's anything wrong, in my opinion, with the fans making that clear, right? Like, I think it actually makes the sport, it makes the storylines, it makes things interesting. If the fans didn't have an opinion, didn't have anyone to dislike or want to lose or like hate watch, for a modern term, it would make the sport less interesting. Whether you think it's fair or not, like, that doesn't matter to me. It's what's natural in sport. Like, this is how it is. If you're a fan of any team in any sport, there are certain teams or individuals that you will want to lose, almost certainly. This isn't Ring Around the Roses, right? Like, this is a serious sport with serious money and pedigree and history and legacy on the line. So, it's how it is. I don't really see an issue with it. But understandably, if you're in that position, you're not going to be happy about it. And I totally get that. Like, if I was Max, would I be happy getting booed in front of this crowd? Like, absolutely not. So that's rumour has it anyway that Max was not happy about this. Neither was Jos, and Jos even said this: you do it for Formula 1, you're there to promote the sport, and then you are booed by the public. I don't think that is acceptable from the perspective of Horner and his son Max. Even going on to say, well, actually, this was one of the quotes. I wanted to share the full quote for you guys because that goes as following. This is from Jos Verstappen, Max's father. In itself, I thought it was a reasonable presentation. I just found it embarrassing what happened there with Red Bull Racing. They booed Horner like that, and also Max. Now, it's obviously funny because probably Jos only really cares about Max. Like, let's be honest here, he's not exactly got the best relationship with Horner. I wouldn't be surprised if Jos was booing Horner himself from the side stands, let's say, of the crowd. But he does go on to say this: I don't think that's acceptable. I understand it because Max is the only one who fires up those English people and tells them exactly how things are, but I don't think it's acceptable. It's really disappointing what's happened there. And he goes on to say, Max doesn't want that, to be booed like that in front of 25,000 people. He also says, if it's in England next year, they will definitely not see me. So that's Jos quoting Max, what he told him. So apparently Max wasn't happy with that, and fair enough. As I say, I wouldn't be happy with it either. It's just, to me, it's part of the sport. It's what comes with being a dominant champion. But yeah, Max says, apparently, that if they run F175 again in England, as in it probably would be in London if it was going to be in England, then he isn't going, right? He's not happy with the way that the fans in England treated him, and therefore he ain't coming back. So look, maybe this is, if Red Bull say, look, Max, you gotta come, like, we're paying you to come, is he really gonna say no? I don't know. But Max clearly didn't want to go this time for other reasons, and now he certainly doesn't want to go again. Now, if they do run F176 next year, which they may well do, I think the event was probably, they will consider it to be a success. Wasn't really my cup of tea, but, you know, fair enough. I understand what they're going for. They probably will do it in another country, so it's probably not something Max has to especially worry about. But still, I thought an interesting statement. You're there to promote the sport, show off the new liveries, and, you know, but if they can make a mess like this, the question is, what are you there for? You have to prepare yourself to go out there anyway, but then they boo you like that. I think they have to seriously consider it, because it's not part of the sport. You know, from his perspective, I get it, but as far as I'm concerned, it is just part of not just the sport, but sport in general. However, the FIA disagree with this assessment, and I thought it pretty fascinating here. I don't really know why the FIA are finding the need to say this. Maybe it's because they got booed themselves, who knows. But they said the following, the FIA: great rivalries throughout the history of motorsport have contributed to making it such an exciting experience of fans. Absolutely true. But what underpins sport at all levels, it's a culture of respect. As such, it was disappointing to hear the crowd's tribalist reaction, which, you know, it's quite explicit comments really here from the FIA, and it's like, at the end of the day, fans, certainly on some level, always going to be tribalist. That's simply how it is. You think the Tifosi aren't tribalist? I mean, that's the nature of fandoms, no? But anyway, their reaction to the FIA Formula 1 world champion Max Verstappen and his Red Bull team principal and CEO Christian Horner at the F1 launch in London. Max and Christian have both contributed greatly to the sport we love. In the season ahead, we should not lose sight of that. As part of the FIA's commitment to protect the integrity of the sport, we are leading a coalition tackling online abuse. So I guess that's what they're going for, that you know, they are basically uniting their competitors against this growing threat of abuse and whatever. And sure, I think that's, like, on some level an admirable attempt, because social media is not great, but this wasn't really about that as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, interesting. I don't really agree with the reaction here from the FIA. I understand why Max isn't going to be very happy about it, but look, if this was another era with another different champion going to another country and getting booed by the fans, like, you know, it is what it is. We've seen this elsewhere. I don't think it should be a massive surprise, and at the end of the day, I think you want the fans to care and be passionate and be interested and have their heroes and villains, because that's what makes people tune into the sport, right? But I feel like some would say that my perspective here is, like, a little bit outdated, but and like, it shouldn't be like that nowadays. But I don't know, I don't really agree, and I think this is how, like, this is just how human nature, right? Like, I don't know, I'm not really sure I'm going to change my mind on this. But intrigued to your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comment section below. What really matters is that the car is fast as far as Red Bull are concerned. But hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.